hey folks, here we are again with another discussion for our modules in our class on family law and society and the effects on children. This one here, we're going to just really delve deeper into what we call authoritarian parenting as opposed to authoritative parenting, and then of course permissive parenting, and then what we would term negligent parenting. So one of the really important things that we want to talk about is a lot of the research that was done on this by Baumrind. It's mentioned by Hillary Clinton, like I said before. Some really good articles on this. One that I found of interest is this one that we have made available to students. This one is by Nancy Darling and Lawrence Steinberg. This is outside reading, but I think it's very worthwhile. Get some different points of view in addition to your textbook and even to me. Well, basically, there's broad consensus according to Nancy Darling and Lawrence Steinberg that parenting practices have a profound effect on child development. And obviously, poor parenting, even well-intended, can cause a child to go bad and actually turn to crime. And sometimes, even though we think, well, I need to really teach children, and give them some hard lessons and explain things in a way that they'll never forget, for instance, spanking, different things like that, or even shouting or angry words, finger pointing in the nose, this type thing. This can actually be very counterproductive in a child's older years. And I didn't escape that much myself growing up as a child. I mean, it was tough at times. I mean, anything that I did wrong, I would know about it like right away by my mother. And if it was really bad, then I'd hear about it from my dad. One of the things, though, that we're saying is over time, there's a thing called authoritative parenting, which is to say, you use basically all forms of parenting, kindness, goodness, obviously love, caring are primary elements of authoritative parenting. They'll give children guidance. You draw that line in the sand. You say, no, you can't pass it. Go, you can't collect your $200 this week because you were bad. It doesn't necessarily involve any kind of corporal punishment, anything like that. Authoritarian parenting is, almost like jackbooted, drill sergeant type approach. You will do this and you will do that. Problem with that is sometimes children, if everything is wrong, then you can never figure out the difference between right and wrong. So if some things are little things, but you treat them like they're big things, and you don't discriminate between little things and big things, everything's wrong, that's kind of the authoritarian way, then it's hard for children to distinguish between right and wrong. As far as, it's one thing, it's a little small thing to not clean up your room, for example. It's quite another thing to set the cat on fire. These are different problems, and that you need to deal with them differently. A very serious offense where somebody's harmed, even an animal or a pet, another child, and so forth, requires serious involvement by the parent. They need to be serious about this and really clamp down in those situations where it's dangerous, unsafe, harmful to others, even harmful to, really seriously harmful to property. But if it's a lesser type of thing, like say forgot to clean up my room or just forgetful, then reminders is the best way to go. Of course, the problem with that is they say, well, I've told you about this like 6 times. Well, the permissive parent may, I love you, yes, and I've told you this, and there's never consequences. Never. The permissive parent is basically one that just lets, it's just a pushover. And so a lot of this work that we're talking about here comes out of studies by Diane Baumrind. This was in the 60s through the 80s, even up to 1991. And so, it's an issue of that the parents have to be mature themselves in terms of understanding. You don't just fly off the handle, angry outburst, screaming, yelling, child screaming, yelling. That's just not that productive. If on the other hand you say, hey, there's rules, you don't cross this line, that's more the authoritative approach, authoritative approach, not the authoritarian approach. So sometimes I get a little bit tangled up in these words myself. But of course, the negligent parent are the ones. My little client Johnny, who's now a huge man, was 5 years old, was stealing the milk money. Found out totally negligent parent, crack addict, alcoholism, child left to just fend for itself all the time, day and night, and hungry, for example, and therefore resorting to crimes and stealing and things like that. But that child at the age of 5 engaged in a series of outbursts in school, and sometimes you can identify children that are going to live a life of crime at a very early age. That's why it's so important to have other options out there, like really good parenting skills and approaches with very young children too. Alternatives include preschool, this high scope preschool project we talk about at length in some of our involvement here is very effective. So any kind of a preschool where they get enrichment, have other people involved, where everybody is talking kindly, and yet at the same time they have a set of class rules and this type things, is very helpful. But it's sad to say that certain children from a negligent parent background are destined, for basically a bad life and a sorry life. And so you can either be too involved in your child's life like an authoritarian, where it's like every minute of every day of every hour you're shaking your finger, you're raising your voice, and it's just a constant thing. And then the far extreme of the other end is you have no involvement, the child's just left to roam and do what it wants to do. Other kind of issues with parenting at that negligent level is parents are working too much, they can't give the children the attention that they need. Other things is substance abuse by parents, like I mentioned, cocaine or crack, or even alcoholism. Jeffrey Dahmer, perfect example. Very rich family, very well-to-do, living in Bath Township near Cleveland, Ohio, very fancy area. And yet that young man was totally ignored by mother, who was an alcoholic, and totally ignored by father, who was working all the time. Very good job. I think he was an engineer, and made really, really good money. But the downside of it was there was just no time for Jeffrey. And so, emotions get tied up in this. If the parents are not careful, that they can, just be constantly gesturing, loud tone of voice, just spontaneous outbursts of anger. Why did you do that? Why don't you ever listen to me? And things like that are just very counterproductive and bad for a child, where the authoritative parent is always in control and making conscious decisions. Well, now how do I want to handle this situation? I could just ignore it. That's one possible way. Little things, little slights like that, you might ignore. For instance, let's say the child passes gas. Well, you can make a big deal about that. Oh, that's so embarrassing. Why are you doing this to me? Or you can just not even say anything or do anything. I think the two worst extremes is to get overwrought and upset about it, or the other end, which is to say, oh, that was funny, that was a loud one, things like that. So you're almost better on something like that, just to act like it never happened. And then, as you go up the scale of, more important things, you want them to have a sense of organization, keep their room clean, and pick up the dirty clothes and just different things like that. And if you have repeated conversations like that, then it's almost like repeat offenders. is, you have to have more severe consequences, but never screaming, pointing, yelling, stamping, and no whipping or, anything like that for anything on that low level. Now, I'm not saying that corporal punishment is never advisable. I am saying, though, that you need to be very guarded about that and just use it in far extreme cases. Frankly, the question I raised in another lecture is it right if a child engages in some kind of violent behavior, maybe beats up a younger brother or sister, and then you turn around and you whip him for that? I mean, is that really the answer? Sometimes that seems counterproductive, that you deal with violence by using violence. That may not be the answer. Cooling off period, sitting down with them, saying, why did you do that? Why can't you control yourself? Where the parent is exercising control could be a better message and a demonstration of, even though things, really hurt your feelings, feel really bad, you can deal with them in an adult manner, and that's the goal for you, for your child, is to become effective, solid citizen adults. And so basically, straightforward type of approaches that don't involve all this yelling, screaming, waving arms, stamping, and then back talk from the child, and then it just gets, and then a lot of times nothing comes of it. Just a lot of screaming, yelling, and it's just not productive. It's better if you can be cool and talk about this without getting angry. And that's tough order for an adult parent. Sometimes that you see, a pattern, and it starts to make you angry, and it's tough to control your own feelings and emotions. And so that's the problem you get into, is the difference between objectivity of, hey, what are we really trying to do here, is to raise an effective, good student, citizen, and adult, or are we just downright mad and angry and want all of this to stop, and so we just resort to just an outburst of our own, kind of an emotional, kind of a dam bursting exercise of, I can't believe, and that's just not a good demonstration for a parent to even show a child about how to deal with problems. So basically, Baumrind and started this in like 1966, and so she said that the whole thing is about socializing children, and that's what I've been talking about, is there's a right way and a wrong way, and this is kind of an ecological approach, and Baumrind is the one that came up with this typology of these 4 different types of being the authoritarian, which is kind of a Nazi, jackboot, drill sergeant type person, authoritative, which is a person that's knowledgeable, effective, objective, can draw from permissive things or authoritarian things depending on the need. So in other words, cool and less emotional and more objective. Permissive, there's just, I love you, and so there's never any punishment. You may say, Johnny, I've told you again and again I don't want you to do that, and then you drop it. Okay, where's that getting us? Nowhere. And then, of course, the negligent, which is totally hands-off, no idea what's up with the child. And we can look at that in the Columbine killings, the Jeffrey Dahmer, some of these things. Some of the most negligent parents are actually the most affluent parents. They're all involved in their own narcissism, their own lifestyle, their own needs, and this type thing, and they just ignore their children to leave them to their own devices. So this is not good. Other parts of this is that, poverty doesn't really have to play a role in this. If you look at it, many people have been poor in their lives and turned out just fine. In fact, there's a lot more poor people out there than there are rich people. And so it's funny, but even some of the most affluent or people with the most money are the least effective parents. And then that's kind of a sad thing, because they have everything that a person could want except a good relationship with their child, and largely because they're ignoring their child. And so they just pop in for a few minutes, hey, what's going on, and then often go on to another party or another work event or something like that, instead of being right down where it's at, which is, sitting with the child, spending time with the child. 2 things: quantity of time with the child and quality of time with the child. Both are very, very important. And so the more time you can spend, the better. It's sometimes not possible. People have to work and things like that. But try to carve out time in your day and your week that you do things just with the child and that you center your life around that child's life. It's a big responsibility, but it's very, very important. Cases that I've seen, I might have mentioned this elsewhere, case where step-parent was very abusive to the mother and turned around and came home on a Friday afternoon and was shot by the stepson because he's just sick and tired of all the anger and all the yelling and screaming in the household. So this authoritarian way of doing things is not effective and can, in the long term, have a very poor outcome in the family, especially if you're the one getting shot. That could be a pretty bad outcome. So basically, it's one of those situations where you try to find a balance between being the authority, which is the authority figure in that family, and what you say goes, to the range of being too permissive and just saying, "Oh, Johnny, I love you, and I wish you wouldn't do that," and and then nothing. So you've got to find out the right range between being overly authoritarian, and being too permissive. So somewhere in there, what they call authoritative is the kind of the middle ground between permissive and authoritarian, which is over the top, yelling, screaming, slapping, beating, just different things like that. It's just kind of out of control. And for the least little things, that's the worst part of it, is you cannot discriminate between what's really seriously wrong and what's kind of a little bit wrong. It's all a sin, and so therefore you're going to hell anyway, so might as well make the worst of it, which is to turn your life to crime. And so that's the worst outcomes for children, is if they do have poor parenting, then they do, in often cases, turn out poorly and end up resulting in a life of crime themselves. And so, these are some thoughts to consider. Sometimes it's just pure luck that we get through this. We feel like we've done everything right, but the child still turns out wrong. And so it's important in these cases that you do everything you can as a parent to be objective, cool, calm, collected, and deal with problems and issues effectively by discussing them with the child and resorting to any kind of serious punishments like corporal punishment, only in the worst kinds of examples of cases. Other kinds of things like time out, taking away privileges, other things like this are a good range of other kinds of punishments that you could try as an authoritative parent. And here again, though, there needs to be a style. Well, looking at this report that we have and trying to put all this in context, you've got a parental goals and values, you've got a parenting style, you've got a child. Let's face it, some children can be born with an attitude. And so, just how willing is the adolescent to listen, to go along and to be socialized. And then all these things play together. And then a parent has to practice what they preach. So if they say there's going to be punishment for this, then there needs to be punishment. You give somebody, more or less 3 chances, like in baseball, and you say, look, I've warned you about this. The next time there's going to be consequences. So it happens again. So then it's time out. Okay, well then it happens still again after time out. Well then that's where you may have to more or less up the ante and engage in some form of corporal punishment or taking away privileges, movies, TV shows, game. A lot of them have like a Game Boy or different kind of games on television now. If you just say no television, then that could be an effective punishment. One thing I would caution, though, is don't use homework as a punishment. That's a terrible thing to do, because we want children to embrace reading, we want children to embrace study, we want children to embrace their homework, their schoolwork. So to say, well, I'm going to send you to your room and you just need to go do your homework and you can't watch TV. Don't even mention the word homework in there. Anything to do with schoolwork as a punishment is a bad mistake, and leads to a bad outcome, because the child then says, okay, homework equals punishment, therefore I don't like homework, I don't like punishment. And so it's logical, you know. But this whole thing of socialization, very important. And so you're teaching the child as much by your actions how you deal with problems as you are by your words. And if your words are loud and, you know, uncontrolled, overly emotional, or if your actions are out of control, then the child becomes out of control. So hey, very interesting, very important. I hope you've enjoyed this today, and use it to your benefit, and then we'll meet again soon. Thanks for watching.